This loser has never seen the sunlight, but when he is suddenly thrust into a medieval world with summoning powers, he receives a second chance to finally step outside and touch the grass. This story begins when our protagonist's favorite game shuts down all its servers. With the game offline, the protagonist realizes he will have to touch the grass if he doesn't find another game to complete that takes 10 years. So he starts looking online for a hardcore game and ends up finding one that claims to have no ending. With his interest already piqued, he feels he is facing a true challenge, so he chooses the highest difficulty, Hell mode, and also the hardest class, Summoner. However, the moment he hits play, the computer literally absorbs him into the game world, reincarnating him as a newborn. His father is happy to learn he has a son and names him Alan. Alan receives a lot of love from both parents and feels grateful, even though he was born into a poor farming family. Over the following months, he learns that he is in a rural village where most of the people farm the land and pay taxes to the feudal lord. Alan's father, Raiden, is a farmer, and his mother, Teresia, is a housewife. As they are both in their 20s, Alan believes he will soon have younger siblings and can hardly wait to be part of a larger family. One night, remembering the basic cliches from Ezekiel, Alan uses the command Open Status Window. It works, but instead of a holographic menu, appearing, a grimoire shows up, making Alan panic. He quickly uses the command Close Status Window before his parents enter the room and pretends to be asleep. After ensuring everything is safe, he summons the grimoire again and begins to flip through its pages. The first page shows Alan's attributes, and as expected, all are at the lowest level. The next page details Alan's summoning ability. As he reads, he discovers that he is already capable of summoning insects and beasts of rank H. Suddenly, the book begins to glow and turns to a new page on its own. It is a message from Elmia, the creator of that world, explaining that the Summoner class is still in beta testing and apologizes if Helen experiences difficulties due to the chosen class. Helen doesn't care about the message and proceeds to try to summon an insect. However, no matter how many times he attempts the incantation, the summoning magic simply does not work. Thinking of a solution, Alan realizes that he may need to create the creature first. So, he creates a ranked insect card. But just as he is about to summon the beast, he notices that his mother, Teresia, is, approaching. Therefore, he pretends to sleep again, but ends up actually dozing off. The next morning, early on, Hayden goes out to chop wood while Teresia begins washing clothes. With both occupied outside, Alan seizes the opportunity and uses the insect summoning spell, causing his room to fill with glowing spheres of spirits. Fortunately for Alan, his mother notices nothing, so he quickly continues. When the spirit spheres condense again, they manifest in the shape of a grasshopper the size of a cat. Upon seeing the creature's furious expression, Alan wonders if it will obey his orders. Nevertheless, he decides to try and, with his weak baby voice, commands the insect to fly into his hands. However, the insect turns away, making Alan question whether it is foolish or something like that. He suspects that the reason the grasshopper is not obeying is that he has not yet fulfilled the necessary conditions. So, he checks the grimoire and looks at the grasshopper's status window. He chooses the name Dina for the green insect and examines its attributes. Upon discovering that this small insect grants +1 in endurance and agility, Alan lets out an incredible on impulse, which causes his mother to enter the room. Upon seeing the ugly insect, Teresia feels disgust and instinctively crushes it. Despite this accident, Alan continues to test his summoning ability whenever he can, and on one day decides to summon a beast. A white rat appears, and, as expected of a rank H beast, it is as dull as a door, just like Dina. Even so, Alan names it Mouse and examines its attributes. Discovering that he has a skill called Scurry, Alan is able to activate this skill by making the mouse run quickly around him. This leads him to think about the kinds of powerful monsters he will be able to summon and control in the future. For now, he can only create a total of 10 summoning cards, so he creates 10 rat cards. As a result, his attack attributes receive a bonus, thanks to the effect of the mouse. With this increase, he can already chop wood easily, despite being only 1 year old. Still, Alan feels that it's not enough. This leads him to think how much easier the game would have been if he had chosen a different difficulty, making him regret selecting Hell mode. Roden returns home covered in blood, which makes Teresia worry, thinking he has hurt himself. However, Roden assures her that he is fine, explaining that he went hunting for a wild boar. Before that, Roden asks Alan if he would like to see the boar they hunted. Alan eagerly agrees, and Reeden carries him to the spot where the beast is being butchered. On the way, they see a flock of birds called alba herons. which are the size of dinosaurs. Because of this, Reborn refers to them as monsters. Rodan tells Alan an interesting fact, saying that his name was inspired by these birds, hoping that he too will live freely and be able to fly wherever he wants in this world. Alan ends up falling asleep in Rodan's arms as they walk. When they finally arrive at the location, Rodan wakes him up and shows him the great wild boar. Upon touching it, the first thing Alan thinks about is how powerful that monster is, doubting whether he will ever be able to defeat a creature of that level. One of their neighbors, Gerda, approaches Rodan and praises him as the star of the day. The other villagers present also compliment him, as a victory of that level is not something just anyone can achieve. Thus, everyone acknowledges how well he performed. Gerda then notices Alan and comments on his black hair and eyes. Alan responds to the greeting, and Gerda is shocked to realize that he can already talk at just 1 year old. She remarks that Alan is growing up much better than Kreta, her daughter, who is practically the same age. He asks about the great boar and how strong it is. Gerda explains that the great boar is a rank C monster, something that one person cannot defeat alone, requiring about 20 men to bring it down. This gives Alan a good basis to evaluate himself and think about how he can become stronger. 10 months pass quickly, and Alan is now 1 year and 10 months old. He continues training his skills and realizes that he can now summon rank G monsters. Additionally, he can also fuse rank H and G monsters. He has rank H and G monster cards, so he checks his cards and attempts to use his new power, but receives a notification that his MP is low. He assumes the issue is hunger and goes to eat. He devours a huge plate of food, leaving his parents visibly worried, but immediately returns to his room to test his powers again. When he tries to fuse the cards once more, it doesn't work again. Low MP. He thinks about creating another card, but the warning repeats. In the end, he ends up giving up for now. 3 years pass, and Alan is now 3 years old. He has accumulated enough strength and MP, and finally manages to fuse 2 cards. He fuses a rank G card with a rank H one and obtains a GH card. Then he summons a pet. From that, he successfully manages to summon a rank G bird and feels excited. The bird, which he names Chepe, has level 2 in agility and strength, as well as the ability to mimic voices, which makes Alan believe he can use it effectively against enemies in battle. He goes outside with his new pets. The first is Hop, a small bird that only hops. He asks Hop to jump, thinking of using this move to distract his opponents. The second is Mole, a pet with the ability to dig. He asks Mole to dig, and the pet opens a hole that Alan imagines using as a trap against enemies. While planning his imaginary life, he ends up falling into the hole that Mole dug. This brings him back to reality. He is still just a child and cannot even fight against anyone. It's 3 in the afternoon. This only adds to his worries. He hears a voice that makes him uneasy and knows exactly whose voice it is. It belongs to Kreta, Jerta's daughter, who came to play with him as usual. They play fighting games every day, so they grab their wooden swords to duel. Kreta is much faster than he imagines and possesses immense strength, completely dominating the reincarnated protagonist. After hitting him repeatedly, without him being able to defend himself, Alan falls to the ground defeated and loses the match. His parents arrive, and Teresia's belly is already as big as he had predicted, which means a sibling is on the way. Teresia and Reborn ask Kreta to go home, and they return as well. During dinner, Alan suggests to his father that he would like to accompany him to the farm to help with the harvest, since his mother is pregnant and cannot assist. Rodan declines the offer, and Teresia insists that she is still strong enough to continue. They appreciate Alan's help with household chores, but they emphasize that he is still a child, and a 3-year-old boy should not be working on the farm. To Alan, he already possesses the strength of an adult and could lighten his parents' burden. Still, he understands that no parent would want to subject their child to something like that. Teresia tells him to keep playing with Kreta. They comment on the fighting games among the children and how skilled both of them are. Rodan mentions that, with the skills they have already demonstrated, he can hardly wait to see the results at the evaluation ceremony. Alan doesn't know what that means, so Rodan explains that upon turning 5, there will be a ceremony where they will discover what skills they possess. If they receive good skills, they will be able to free themselves from servitude. Rodan also comments that he has seen Alan throwing stones at the tree outside and asks why. Alan lies, saying it's because he was told there are monsters out there, so he wants to throw stones to protect his mother. In reality, he has been throwing stones to check if he has any other abilities besides summoning. The next day, he practices his summons and realizes he has reached a point where he can summon all day without getting tired. He also watches his aunt Dansa. but he gets distracted when Krita shows up. They go to the usual duel, and as always, Alan loses and falls to the ground. Rodin arrives and Teresia goes to greet him. Unfortunately, Dana jumps on her, startling her. She recovers from the shock, but suddenly feels strong pains in her belly. Her water breaks, and the baby is about to be born. Rodin tells Krita to call his mother, Matilda, while he takes Teresia to bed, trying to help in his own way. Alan boils water and goes to announce that the water is hot, and coincidentally, Matilda arrives at the same time. She orders the men to leave the room and helps Teresia with the delivery. The men nearly fall asleep outside the house when Teresia finally gives birth, calling them back, full of excitement. Alan now has a brother, and Rodin names the baby Mex, which makes Teresia question if that is not also the name of a monster. Eden replies with a smile, showing that she is right. Seeing the excitement on everyone's faces, Alan begins to wonder why he was reincarnated, putting aside the fact that he was just a gaming addict wanting to level up in a new game. In his previous life, he was no more than a lonely workaholic, living miserably. There was nothing about that life worth missing. To be honest, he loves the idea of his new family. For now, all he wants is to free his family from servitude. Teresia calls him to greet the baby. He approaches to see the child, who immediately starts crying. Alan is terrified by this, and everyone jokes, saying that babies are like that. Alan is undoubtedly enjoying his new life. Now all that's left is to cross his fingers and watch him grow. Time passes, and now Alan is 5 years old. He asks his father how the evaluation ceremony works. His father explains that it is a special event that everyone, from servants to nobles, is required to participate in when they turn 5. If a servant has talent, they can be freed from servitude. But that's not easy since there are many rivals. Since they colonized the lands, many babies have started to be born, and therefore, many children are about to turn 5. Krita calls Alan so they can go together to the evaluation. Upon arriving at the evaluation city, the children are impressed by the number of houses. Krina comments that she wants to be a shin sword so that she can join the knights in front of the evaluation site. A large crowd gathers. Alan notices that the other children who are already there are much better dressed than he is. The doors open and 3 hooded figures appear, asking for Omea, the god of creation, to bless everyone so that the children may achieve good lineages. They mention that once a child who was a servant became a hero, and everyone is shocked by this information. One of the hooded figures explains that Clazes, the Holy One, was a commoner, and Dverg, the Lord of Swords, was a servant. Alan remembers that in the game, classes like Hero and Lord of Swords should start from a low social class, and that apparently the game settings still apply in that world. Thus, he understands why everyone needs to undergo the ceremony. They begin to enter the church and stop in front of the statues of the gods worshipped in that world. Upon seeing the statue in the middle, Alan realizes that it is Elmaya, the god of creation. When he received a letter from the developers, this name was mentioned in it. The evaluation begins with the chief's son. At least he is instructed to place his hand on the crystal ball, and any talent he has will appear written on the metal plaque behind him. The boy approaches the crystal ball while his father is ecstatic about the result. He puts his hand on the ball, and it reveals that he has a talent for being a merchant. The father is happy, as this is excellent news. Alan realizes that having a talent is a reason for celebration. Alan invokes his grimoire, which no one can see, as the way statuses appear in the grimoire and on the stone is different. The next boy touches the crystal ball, but nothing happens, and he runs crying to his father. The following boy slaps his own face twice to motivate himself, and again the crystal ball glows, revealing that he has talent as an axe wielder. The evaluation continues until only Krina and Alan are left. Krina is called and runs toward the crystal. She places her hand on it, and the crystal shines brightly. His father worries and asks the Reverend what it means. The Reverend says it's a miracle, for she has received the talent of Lord of Swords. Everyone is surprised, as she sells a small village. His father is beaming, and Alan thinks that this is the only way to justify her absurd strength. Soon it's our protagonist's turn. He walks up to the crystal ball, thinking that now everyone will know that he is a summoner. He places his hand on the ball, and it glows very faintly, but suddenly, the glow disappears. Alan wonders why it vanished, and suddenly the ball glows intensely, blinding everyone and throwing the protagonist to the ground. His father rushes to him and asks if he is okay. Alan replies that it was nothing, as Krana has made him go through worse things. He asks the Reverend what his talent is, and the answer is that he has no talent. Alan runs to the stone and notices there is a text error in his talent. He calls the developers useless, as they can't even fix their own game, and that because of this, everyone will think he is someone without talent. His father hugs him to comfort him and says it's better to go home, as his mother is waiting for him. When they return, Alan's mother hugs him. Later, inside the house, his father says that talent is not something important and that Alan will always be his pride. His brother also comforts him. Alan thinks that even though they are a poor family, he is very happy to have been born into that family. While lying down, he summons his book and adds his cards to it. Remembering that all his statuses are at rank I, he realizes he is the only one there playing at super difficult level. Everyone at the ceremony was 5 years old, so they should all be at the same level since the ranking system likely reflects the amount of growth. Thus, the only reason all his attributes are at rank E is that he chose Hell level, where progress is only 1/100th of normal. A regular person would be tearing their hair out, but for him it's all fine because he's going to put this weak game in its place. Still, he feels a bit down remembering the text error in his skill and goes back to complaining about the developers. The next day, Alan and his mother are walking, and he asks what is wrong with his father. His mother says that he has been like this since the night before when he came home. We then see a flashback to the previous night when they went to Krina's house to celebrate her becoming a Lady of the Sword. Helena asks Alan if he knew that a Lady of the Sword is even better than a Shin sword, and he replies that he didn't, even though he knows the truth, but he needs to act foolish. Krina's mother comments that the village chief stopped by earlier and left them a celebratory liquor as a gift. She hands the drink to her husband to open. Roden congratulates with a grim expression, and Gerda says that the guests should drink first. Alan even thinks his father is jealous of Krina for being a Lady of the Sword, but he knows he isn't that petty. Roden tries to fill Gerda's glass, but he refuses, saying he won't drink anything while he has that sour expression on his face. The two start to fight, and Roden asserts that Krina has an incredible talent and that it is a reason to celebrate. Gerda, irritated, asks why Roden wants to sever ties with his family, shocking everyone with this revelation. Roden says that Krina's talent is extraordinary and that she has a chance to join the cavalry and serve the country. If that happens, she could become a noble and should therefore not be socializing with servants. Alan realizes he is saying this to prevent Gerda's family from having to ask for help, but the fight continues. Alan asks Krina to stop the argument. She grabs her sword, but before she can act, the mothers put an end to the fight by hitting both of them and making them quiet down. Alan asks if they always fight like this, and Matilda confirms, explaining that after they became parents, they matured a bit, but before that, they were very explosive and would exchange punches all the time. His mother explains that the four are childhood friends, grew up in the same village, and that 10 years ago, a rumor about a new village emerged. They decided to move there and worked hard to build their own houses. She comments that the houses have the same design because of this, as they found it easier to build them at the same time. Since they didn't have an infinite workforce or supplies, Gerda laid the support beams, Roden built the walls and the floor, and Gerda took care of the roofs. They fill their cups with liquor, and Roden comments that he hasn't drunk since his wedding. The same goes for his friend. They drink, and the next day, one of the villagers informs Gerda that the Order of Knights is coming to see Krina at her house. Krina and Alan practice fencing, and then head to the city to see the Order of Knights. People comment that a Lady of the Sword is just a child. The boy with the axe asks what Alan is doing there, since he has no talent at all. Krina interjects, saying that Alan is stronger than him. At that moment, the knights arrive and everyone steps aside. The captain of the knights, named Zeno, is a master swordsman. He speaks with the village chief, who calls for Gerda and Krina. They approach the knight and the captain asks if she is the master swordsman. Krina then introduces herself. For his part, Alan thinks it would be sad if they took Krina from the village now that she is a master swordsman. However, suddenly, the father gets upset and explains to Zeno that his daughter has never wielded a real sword and that she is barely 5 years old, so what he is proposing is madness. Still, Zeno replies that if she is a master swordsman, everything will be fine, and they must conduct the test. Otherwise, it will be considered that they deceived the knights and the village chief, and manipulating the evaluation ritual is a sin punishable by death. Alan feels that the situation is becoming strange as Zeno orders the vice captain to prepare, as they need to check if the girl truly has this gift, and for that, they must hold a sword duel. Everyone in the village is surprised as Gerda begs the captain to reconsider. However, Zeno makes it clear that if Krina doesn't fight, they will execute them both. At that moment, a knight positions himself next to Krina. Seeing the sword, she asks if she can take it. He confirms, and an excited Krina informs her father that she's going to fight, almost giving him a heart attack. Then, there is a scene change, and Krina finds herself in front of the vice captain of the knights, who introduces himself as Reborn. The fight begins, and Krena, without wasting any time, charges at Reborn, surprising everyone by showing that the small girl can wield a sword of that size. The problem is that when Reborn gets serious, he kicks her against the wall. Gerda tries to intervene, but the knights prevent her, as they do with Alan and her father. He feels frustrated because, although Krena has a great gift, she cannot compete with the actual experience of the vice captain. However, Krena gets back up and starts to unleash an aura from within herself. The vice captain becomes nervous, and Krena quickly advances towards him, who can now do nothing but defend himself. He realizes that Krena has an extra skill, and then the little girl, with a sword strike, breaks his weapon. Zeno calls off the fight, while Krena, very smiling, thanks the vice captain for the match, commenting that he is quite strong for an old man, even though in reality the poor guy is only 24, even younger than me. For her part, Gerda is surprised to realize that her daughter is a true master swordswoman and starts patting the knights' heads as she picks her daughter up. Krena begins to laugh. At that moment, Zeno approaches and says he recognizes Krena's power. He apologizes for his discourtesy, although Gerda continues to show irritation. Still, Zeno mentions that now it is time to talk about her future and informs that, if she wishes, her friends can accompany him already to the chief of the village's house. Alan notices that Gerda is still furious, which is quite understandable. However, he wonders what the hell the axe guy is doing there. His thoughts are interrupted by Zeno, who introduces himself again and warns that he is there by order of the lord of those lands, who wished to verify that the ritual had not been manipulated. He comments to the village chief that normally the village takes the chief's name, but since a master swordswoman was born in this place, the lord of those lands now wishes for the village to be named Krena. The village chief accepts without any complaint. Zeno then reveals that 3 years ago, a master swordsman was born into a count's family. Someone finds this curious and, while stealing some fruit, thinks that master swordsmen can only be born among plebeian servants. Zeno continues telling that this master entered the service of the royal family, but his performance was unsatisfactory. When they repeated the ritual, they discovered he was merely an ordinary swordsman. Because of this, they uncovered that several nobles had tampered with the results of the gifts. Thus, the eye. Royalty began to doubt the results of the ritual. For this reason, Zeno apologizes again to Gerda for having put her daughter to the test. Gerda accepts the apologies as Zeno reveals that Krena will enter the academy when she turns 12, to later serve the royal family. At that moment, the boy with the axe asks if he can become a knight if he goes to the academy, causing his father almost to have a heart attack. He hurriedly apologizes to Zeno. At that moment, Zeno notices Alan's black hair and eyes. Rodan comments that he is his son, while Gerda introduces her friend. Surprised, Zeno stands up, asking if he is the boar hunter. He apologizes for his rudeness, saying he barely greeted the hero of that village. Rodan asks why he calls him that, and Zeno reveals that the lord of those lands is delighted to receive, every winter, the meat of the giant boar that the village sends. He knows Rodan takes great risks in hunting them, so he congratulates him for his excellent work and hopes he receives praise from his esteemed lord. Rodan accepts, shakes his hand, and later bids farewell to his friends. As he walks back home, he comments that if a servant like him can gain recognition from others, then, even if life is very hard, they must continue to live, with their heads held high and with dignity. Alan understands this. After all, his difficulty lies in the way he lives. Before going home, he reveals to his father that he has a gift for his mother and for Machu, and wonders if he perhaps should not have done this. But then, his father starts to laugh and reveals that he did the same. Alem finally manages to increase the level of his summoning skill. He opens his stats and sees that he has gained the ability to enhance, which means he can now make higher level summons and has also unlocked rank F creatures. He wonders if he still needs to fuse cards to get new ones just like he did with Chepe. He also wonders what the next type of his summon will be and starts to daydream, thinking he will be able to summon a dragon. His slot capacity for storing cards has also increased, from 20 to 30. He thinks it has been 2 years since he leveled up his summoning skill, and he is eager for night to come so he can try out his new ability. At night, at home, he offers to wash the dishes because if he finishes the chores quickly, he can secretly try out his skill. His brother asks if he's going to get a sibling. His father responds that it could be either a brother or a sister since they can't tell yet. Teresia thinks it will be a girl, and Rodin says he will start, thinking of a name, but his wife interrupts him, reminding him that he said she could choose the names for girls. He apologizes and asks if she has anything in mind. At that moment, Alan's MP returns to maximum and his book appears. When he opens it, Alan accidentally reads the name Elmaya aloud, and his parents scold him because one must not take the Lord's name in vain. He apologizes and tries to change the subject, saying that his old scar has grown larger. Rodan explains that this happened because he passed the judgment of the gods during the boar hunt. Alem asks what this judgment is. His father explains that it is a special moment that happens sometimes during the hunt, causing a sudden burst of energy that eliminates all injuries and exhaustion. Alem thinks this must be how they describe leveling up in that world, and that his father is an experienced boar hunter. He can't see his father's stats, but he bets that his level must be pretty high. Alem knows that, even with his summoning skill leveling up, he is still level 1 since he never gains SP. For that, he would have to defeat some monsters, but servants are not allowed to leave the village, except for hunting. He asks his father to go hunting with him, but Rodin declines, saying that it is very dangerous and could cost lives. Alan agrees and leaves. Later, lying in bed, he thinks about the message he received earlier, as he suspects he knows what it is about. He had sent several toxic messages to the administrators, and upon checking, realizes he was right. They fixed the problematic text and also his statistics. He believed that all were ranked due to the slow increase in Hell mode, but seeing his actual statistics, he is shocked. He has rank S in MP and Intelligence, and he has the same number of rankings as Krena. He is happy to have been rewarded for his effort. Furthermore, he opens the skill book and begins to enhance Denka, noticing that the creature's stats have increased, specifically those that grant buffs. However, the buffs given to him remain unchanged. He decides to see the improvements and summons Denka. Just by appearance, he can already tell that its power is greater, and this proves that the role of summoners is more than just bringing monsters to life. He is pleased with this, but his mother walks into the room and suddenly comes face to face with Denka. She panics and steps on it. The next day, his father is going out to hunt, and Teresa bids him farewell. Alan, distracted, approaches thinking that after going through a summoning cycle, he has learned that the enhancements of a card do not disappear. This means that as long as he has spare MP, he should enhance all the cards in his inventory. His mother calls him to say goodbye to his father. He bids farewell and wishes him a good day. While he is hanging the clothes, he thinks that every day he has tested various combinations, but he still hasn't managed to unlock any new types. The only test he hasn't done yet is Insect F with Bird F. He tries and finally succeeds, unlocking a new grass card rank F. He is a bit disappointed with the rank, but seeing the buffs, he is happy because it comes with an MP buff, which is very good for him. Thanks to this buff, he will be able to do a lot more throughout the day. At the current pace, it would take decades to reach the next level, but this card could reduce it by a few years. He decides to see what the card is capable of and summons it. An apple appears, and he names it Oppo, saying that clearly he was not made for fighting. In the summoning letter, it states that his ability is aroma. Alan asks him to use his ability, Oppo. Then he enters the ground and a seedling grows. Alan smells the essential oil and thinks that the dull backyard is now closer to becoming a botanical paradise, but he comes back to reality remembering that he is not a gardener. His mother approaches with his brother, calling him for lunch. He asks Oppo to return, but nothing happens. His mother asks what that seedling is, and Alan makes up an excuse, saying he doesn't know, while wondering what the issue is with Oppo. Afterwards, he goes to practice fencing with Krena and is again defeated. However, Krena praises him, saying that he has gotten stronger. Alan thinks that his sword mastery has reached level 3, and that besides that, the inventory expansion has allowed more space to increase resistance and attack. He wonders if Apple's aroma has any effect in battle. Later, we see Alan throwing stones at a tree. In his thoughts, he has thrown more than 20,000 times, but there is no sign that his ability will evolve. His brother Mesh asks when they are going home because it is very boring. Ever since their mother got pregnant, Alan has been responsible for taking care of Mesh and helping his mother with chores. He thinks it is better to focus on increasing his summoning level, as it is not worth trying to boost his throwing skill level. Still, he continues throwing, believing that the next throw might level him up. At that moment, his brother asks what those trees are. Alan explains that he did some tests and discovered a few things, mainly about Apple's ability. The aroma he produces can reduce MP recovery time, which is quite useful as it allows for even more physical activities. At night, Alan mentions to his mother that his father is late, and Teresa wonders why he is delayed since Radan had said he would be working nearby. At that moment, Gerda shouts for Radan to hold on, as several men carry Radan on a wooden board. Teresa and Alan run to him, while Gerda warns him that he is home with his family. He explains that Radan was badly hit in the stomach. Gerda says they only managed to keep him alive thanks to a healing herb called Flor Muller. Teresa is shocked, as it is something very valuable, but the man explains that he received it from the knights as an apology for what happened to Krena, and that without this flower, they would be doomed. One of the helpers says it was the fault of a stupid peasant. They are outraged and want to make the peasant pay. But Mexia Corda goes into the room and starts to cry. Alan takes him inside, and the helpers leave. Alan asks Gerda what really happened, and he explains that a few days ago, he received a summons from the village chief. He wanted them to let the peasants participate in the hunt because wild boar meat is valuable to them, even though most of it goes to the baron. The leftovers are divided among the hunters. Despite this, no peasant had ever volunteered for a hunt before because it is very dangerous, and there are casualties every year. But the servants make a living this way, so there is nothing to be done. Alan asks why the peasants decided to participate this time. Gerda explains that it was because they heard there was a hero among them. He remembers that the captain of the knights, Zeno, called Rodan a legend in front of everyone, and for that reason, the peasants thought they would be safe to join the hunt. Neither he nor Rodan felt comfortable with amateurs accompanying them, but since it was a direct request from the village chief, they couldn't refuse. To make matters worse, a day before the hunt, there were people who didn't want to practice seriously. When the day of the hunt arrived, they gave the peasants the easiest part, to attract the wild boar's attention. However, at the decisive moment, those who had not wanted to train ran away, breaking formation, and one of them fell while trying to escape from the boar. Rodan tried to defend the peasant and was hit full on. Before leaving, Gerda asks Teresa and Alan to stay strong for Rodan since it will still take him some time to recover. Alan feels it was pointless since he didn't even try to help. He decides to spend the whole night by Teresa's side, taking care of Rodan all the time. In the early morning, Rodan suddenly wakes up, quite agitated, and Teresa immediately embraces him, relieved. Upon seeing him conscious, he stirs and rushes to embrace his father, while Alan simply observes, questioning what he has made of his own life. He had been completely focused on becoming stronger, but power means nothing without purpose. For those people, this is not a game. They are doing everything to survive in such a cruel world. He needs to protect his little brother and the other sibling who is yet to come. At this moment, Gerda returns, bringing part of Rodan's meat, as she promised, and is happy to see him awake. Rodan says he still feels very ill, but Gerda asks him not to worry, assuring him that she will make sure his family is well cared for during the winter. He asks his father to rest and let him take care of things, promising to keep his family safe. Everyone is surprised by his determination, but Alan decides to prove his words through actions. He starts working, carrying heavy things, which impresses the other servants greatly. Alan has decided that it is time to stop pretending, since there is already a rising heroine in that village named Krena. So, there's no problem if a talentless servant like him draws a bit of attention, because family comes first. Teresa thanks Alan for bringing the water, saying it must have been very heavy to carry. Later that day, Gerda teaches him how to pick potatoes, and Alan surprises her with his strength. Gerda admits that he is even stronger than she imagined, and Alan assures her that he inherited it from his father. When they finish, Alan complains that the Baron takes more than half of the potatoes after all their hard work. However, they will still need other things to survive the winter. At this moment, the village chief suddenly appears with an offer of fruits, saying he heard that Rodan is already recovering. Teresia politely thanks him for his generosity, and the commoner responsible for the incident quickly apologizes, saying it was all his fault. Alan glares at him with anger, as a mere apology. Won't fix anything, but Rodan forgives him easily and asks him to be more careful next time if he wants to continue hunting. The commoner takes his words very seriously, and Alan is impressed by how magnanimous his father is. On the other hand, Teresia stands firm and warns the plebeian that this mistake almost cost her husband's life. The plebeian acknowledges the error and accepts her words, but before he can say anything else, the other servants arrive to see. Rodan finally smiles and asks everyone to calm down, as he is still recovering. Alan is simply amazed, realizing he has the best parents. The next day, he decides to create a large area to conduct experiments. When he finally finishes, he summons Hopper, and a bunch of colorful frogs leap onto his face one after another. As a second step, he sets several traps and hides nearby, making sure he's out of sight. After that, Alan calls the frogs using his provoke ability. They begin to hop around the traps while changing color. Alan knows this is the most cliched trap there is, but if he can catch about 50 ducks or wild birds, his family will be able to survive the winter. After a while, Alan gives up and admits that this isn't working, so he decides to rethink everything. However, just as he says this, he gets excited seeing a wild bird approaching. Alan realizes it's not just any bird, but a dangerous albagoron. The monster starts devouring the frogs, and Alan remains hidden, as he didn't expect the provoke ability to attract a rank B monster. It is the monster that his name originates from, and it seems quite strong, so Alan knows that his best option is to flee. Before leaving, he notices that his skill has leveled up to 2, allowing him to increase the attributes of plasma creatures from 10 to 20. So, Alan thinks it's worth a try. Alan charges at the bird with his wooden sword, but the Albageron quickly knocks him down without hesitation. Alan summons Fido, as his chance to use his summons in real combat has finally come. Unfortunately, the Albageron eliminates all of his summons and strikes him with even more force than before. At that moment, Alan realizes he is losing the bonuses from each summoned creature that is defeated, which is weakening him. This is a major inconvenience of being a summoner. Thus, he starts to realize that this could be the end for him. And with that, episode number 3 comes to a close. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe to the channel and comment "final" to show that you made it this far in the video. Continuing the fight Alan calls Chus, they stick to the monster's neck and begin to suck his energy. This way, Alan manages to free himself, although he is very weakened now that he has applied the buffs. He can call the pots and choose to attack, and with a blow to the head, he can knock him down. The Grimoire appears warning him that he defeated an Albaeon, and having 100 experience points in addition, he celebrates saying that it was more satisfying than he imagined. Then he goes to his family to tell them about this feat, taking the Albaeon with him, although he lies saying that he captured it in the sky. Everyone is amazed, but Mash starts crying. His father asks his son if he wasn't hurt, and he replies that he's fine. Gerda is impressed that he captured that, using just a wooden sword and stones, but notices the dog bites he has and asks if he was bitten. Alan replies that he isn't sure because he was very concentrated. Gerda simply believes him and tells Rodan that he will take care of bleeding the creature. At that moment, Alan sees the bump that Gerda has and imagines what belief hit him, but finally details after that Gerda takes Alan to help him with the Albaeon. Gerda tells that of the 60 kilos that he weighs after being bled, only 20 kilos remain. Only half of that is edible. However, the wings have a lot of value, and he thinks it's very kind of him to tell. Although Gerda also comments that 60% of the beast will stay with the boss. This rule also applies to wild monsters of excess rank and such as horned rabbits and albilones of rank D. Then we see Gerda remove the magic stone from the beast. These stay with the boss since they are of no use to them. But back to the important point, a child captured a beast while Rodan is still there injured. So maybe it would be possible to negotiate something with the village chief. This gives Alan an idea and he tells Gerda, so they go to the chief's house. They took the beast to him to tell him his story. The chief gets excited, but they ask if they can keep the beast. The chief replies that they can't, because the Lord of the Lands demands more and more meat. When he hears this, Alan assumes that this is the reason why. They allow commoners to marry, and Gerda proposes to hand over the feathers and the magic stone. But as this is not enough, he sadly tells us about the situation Rodan's family is living in. Beyond, he also enters the scene saying that he is hungry, and even faints as a result. They manage to convince the boss to let them keep the beast. But they go further by suggesting to keep the meat while they deliver the feathers and the magic stone. Gerda reinforces, saying that it is not. Often that an Alban is captured, the boss thinks that it must be very difficult to capture them, so he gives them permission to keep the meat with it resolved. Alan returns to the field to capture more albilones. He uses the plants as bait and tells the chews to drain their energy, then stuns them with a stone, tells the pots to bite, and finally he strikes with his sword, managing to hunt 2. And he mentions that he hunts once every 3 days and that this is the first time that he has not lost any invocation. The Grimoire notifies him of the experience obtained, reaching 1,000 of 1,000 and reaching level 2 beyond. He sees that his attributes will increase except his skills, but he already considers this a great achievement because finally after 6 years he achieved level up and decides to tell his family about it back at home. He shows what he hunted. Rodin is surprised, but also highlights that he managed to do it, and at the same time, Rodin realizes something, but avoid commenting. Suddenly they hear the bells, understanding that it's time to train with belief, so we see Beyond dodging, blocking, and receiving blows, all this while thinking about what you will do next to survive the winter. Dry the meat he hunted, and then exchange it in the village when he counterattacks. He takes the opportunity to think that he should use the presence of the Albalones to kill 20 and reach the level 3. Although he finds it difficult to achieve this before the end of the year because of this distraction, he finds an opening and hits him with a blow, winning the after the fight. The girl says goodbye. Promising back the other day at night, we see Alan reunited with his parents, decided not to hide his secret anymore. He says that when he was 1 year old, he received a divine oracle. His parents are surprised exactly as he expected. His father asks if it was the god. She and Alan confirm by quoting the words that divine beings said to her, saying that he would grant her wisdom and strength. Teresia doesn't understand this very well, so the alien explains that apparently he is more intelligent than the others, and a little stronger physically. In addition, he was told that his approval would be tougher than that of 100 people. Combined, when he heard this, his parents lamented, crying out for mercy to the god Rodan. In turn, he asks if today he overcame the first stage because he realized that the scar he had on his face disappeared. Alan is surprised that he had noticed, and then his father tells him that he has also surpassed his own approval. In the midst of all this, his mother asks about the result of the ritual. Alan responds that he received an oracle from Evil 2 months ago about this and that. His characteristics were classified as weak because his slow evolution was taken into consideration. Furthermore, the reason no gift appeared is because his is completely new. His father seems intrigued to know more, but Ellen replies that he still doesn't know, although it's a lie. He just apologizes to his father for lying, but he can't risk being labeled as a dangerous person if they see him summon creatures. At that moment, his mother approaches to hug him, very worried as she never knew how hard he worked to overcome the approval imposed by God. In the face of this, his father asks him what he intends to do now. Alan responds that he will continue moving forward. Rodan was already expecting this answer, so he asks him not to hesitate in asking help if he ever needs it, but he forbids him to tell this to others as they could consider it blasphemy against his God. Boasting out of guilt, the protagonist sees no problem with that and agrees. So the months pass. Now Alan finds himself cutting the meat of abalones together with Gerda, who comments that he always thought that he was not an ordinary child, but he never imagined that he would receive approval from his God. After that, we see them in the city walking with a huge bag of meat. They talk for a while and Gerda asks if those are your first purchases. Alan confirms. Gerda mentions that since the commoners no longer participate in the hunts, everything has gone better. Talking about them, Alan asks, what is the difference between them and the commoners? Gerda responds that if due to status and taxes, as commoners are not taxed at 60%, as they instead every year must pay 3 gold coins per adult and 1 per child. This calls the attention of the protagonist, who takes the opportunity to ask if it is possible to become a commoner. Gerda responds that it is possible by paying 10 gold coins, but that this can also be granted as a reward by the Lord of the Lands beyond. He does the math, reaching a total of 50 gold coins for his family. Then they arrive at a store where they exchange the meat for salt, then go to another stall fruits back home in the afternoon. The protagonist goes over everything he learned about prices, so we see that they return in the following days. Everything he learns. He writes down in his grimoire, discovering that a gold coin is worth 100 silver coins and that 1,000 copper coins are equivalent to 10,000 iron coins. And so with the prices of products, thinking that it would only be necessary to kill 500 albayalones to get his 50 gold coins, he then goes to another store to ask if there is any potion to recover mana, as there isn't. He asks for something that cures injuries, and the seller tells him. He points out some plants and then draws them in his grimoire. He also asks about the Muris flowers. The seller comments that he doesn't have them and that he couldn't even buy them, although he says he once had one. By chance, it was precisely the one he sold to Gerda last month. He remembers offering to receive it for 3 gold coins instead of 5 to save his friend. In the end, he ended up selling it anyway, thus losing 2 coins when he finds out what Gerda did for his father. Alan gets emotional and gives him some albayalon meat, saying that thanks to him, his father was saved, and that another day he will bring more meat. When he leaves the store, he sees a weapon that costs 50 silver coins. At that moment, the blacksmith's son appears accompanied by the chief's son. The first pushes him, demanding that he become his lackey. Alan gets irritated by this, but is not interested in a fight that doesn't give him experience, yet he draws his sword to scare him, challenging the axeman to draw his weapon and fight, who accepts the offer. Duel and tells the chief's son to watch them while he goes to get his weapon. He returns immediately with a shovel. The axeman fights very well, but does not reach the level of belief, and with the alien movement disarms him before leaving. He tells Dagora that he will come back to buy something and leaves. Leaving the furious in the afternoon, we see the father removing the bandages and boasting that he no longer has nothing. Teresia asks him to be careful not to get hurt again. Alan enjoys this family moment, watching everyone talk. The next day, he finds himself at Krina's house training with Dagora. While the dangerous Krina trains with her younger brother, and Alan realizes that with him she is holding back. Dagora tries to attack Alan by surprise. Alan manages to dodge, and Dagora ends up crashing against the ground at the end of the training. Everyone returns home at night. Alan and his mother take care of his brothers at that moment. His father Rodan and Gerda both arrive with worried expressions inside from home, they explain what happened. The Lord of the Land summoned them and decided to increase the hunting quota to 15 boars. This means that now the commoners will also have to participate Teresia if opposes the decision, but Roden clarifies that these are orders from the Lord of the Lands. Gerda adds something even more worrying. If they do not reach the quota, new servants will be recruited. Besides, he understands the problem well. With more servants, there will be less land for each family, and some may lose it if they do not meet the quota. In addition, Gerda warns that next year the quota will increase to 20 boars. Teresia considers this is absurd and too dangerous, but Roden insists that the Lord of the Land doesn't care what their opinion is, and he agrees, saying that even if they meet the quota, the chief can increase it again, which only it would make the situation worse. When the Gerda criticizes the commoners for being useless, Aelin agrees. But he claims that he can make them useful. He trusts in the wisdom that the god of creation granted him and asks that he be allowed to do so a few days later. Aelin arrives accompanied by the commoners and other servants ready to act. But anyway, if you made it this far, comment on the word talent, so I know you made it to the end.